How easy is it for us to blame other people for the things that are going wrong in our life and our business? In today's episode, I speak with business coach Darien Jay, who talks about the point of power. Are you blaming, denial, excuses for all these things that may be going wrong? Or are you taking responsibility? Are you powerful or are you powerless? Let's take a listen to the great insight that Darien shares. Darien, tell me about your journey. Why business coaching for you?
So I should start by saying that I wear a few hats in my business life. I own two companies, a consultancy firm and a property management business. And I found the first business in 2017. So spent 3.5 years running that pretty much by myself. A couple of colleagues came in and out in that time. But it was in 2021 that I received a message on LinkedIn through a chap called Tom Allchurch over at ActionCOACH in Stroud in the UK. And he just asked how things were going in the business. Long story short, I started working with Tom as my business coach in 2021. And over the next year or two, I saw the benefits of what business coaching offered to my company and to me personally. Honest, Michelle, I completely drank the Kool-Aid. I fell in love with what business coaching was doing for my life, for my business. At that point, I hadn't bought the property management company, my second business. So I just had a consultancy firm. I had a team by that point doing, quite frankly, most of the hard work. And I found myself with a fair amount of free time. And I think Tom's a smart guy. He realized that I was starting to have this free time and said to me, how about you spend some of that free time helping me as a business coach? And long and short of it, Michelle, I jumped at the chance. I really wanted to give something back to the community. And it sounds a bit corny, I know, but having that opportunity to see how others could benefit from what I felt I'd had the fortune to benefit from. So yeah, about 18 months ago, I sat my coaching qualifications, and now I coach not a huge amount of clients because I still have two companies to run as part of my day job, but I have a small selection of clients that I coach on a regular basis. And it's been absolutely fantastic to see the successes they've had, not only in their business life, but in their personal lives as well, from the back of having stable, successful businesses.
Yeah, awesome. Darien, what was it that Tom helped you with in your business? You mentioned you saw an impact for you personally and in your business. I'm keen for you from the client perspective, as a client working with a business coach. What were the key things that really helped you in that business?
So Tom reminds me of this story on a regular basis, and everyone else that we coach together. Our first conversation went something like Tom asking me, was I happy with the business? Where is it going? And my answer was, I don't know what I want to do in my life, but I hate my job and I don't want to keep doing this. And that was a pretty low place to start a business coaching journey, I suspect. But what Tom did very well was gradually build me back up. First of all, to realize that my business shouldn't be a job. It should be something bigger than that. And from there, we started to figure out why I was hating what I was doing, where I could make it work, finding the things that I enjoyed that were part of the business that I'd almost forgotten about. And there were loads of things involved in that, bringing in team members to pick up some of the tasks that I wasn't enjoying at all. Focusing my attention on why I had this company. And, it was relatively successful financially. It was just getting me down, doing the day-to-day, working 60, 70 hours a week. Gary Keating, in one of your previous podcast episodes, talks a lot about exit planning. And he's spot on. For me, the exit goal was so important, figuring out, actually, why am I doing this? Oh, yeah, it's to provide for my family. It's to have a life that I enjoy. And it's to remove that ego of having a business for the sake of having a business and producing something that one day will get me to a point in my life when I'm satisfied, when I'm financially stable, financially free, and I can choose to work. And that's a whole different mindset from turning up 9 to 5, 8 to 8, whatever it used to be, because I have to. And that was all down to Tom, really, understanding that mindset shift and getting me there in the right way without. I think we've got to be very careful with our clients. We talk a lot about disc profiling, action coach, behavior profiling. I think if we push people the wrong way, then sometimes they can get defensive about these things. And Tom figured out exactly which buttons to press for me to get me there in the right way.
What were some of the things you mentioned that your business felt like a job for you? Was that you mentioned you were working, big hours? Like, why did it feel like, was it that you just really had no purpose kind of in that business that you were in? What was the key thing for you that felt heavy?
I think there were two things, Michelle. There was one, I was the CEO. I was also the COO, chief financial guy, head of HR. I was doing everything, really. I don't say small team, but they were broadly fee earning. So apart from a few bits of fee earning work, I was juggling everything and struggling to figure out that I'm not necessarily an expert in HR, in finance, in all of these other roles, albeit as a business owner, you have to have a grasp of everything. But I was trying to do too much. But more than that, I was also the chief fee earner. I was trying to keep the income coming in and keep all of my clients happy, maybe not trusting my team enough, even though they'd done nothing to justify not having trust. That's just me being over controlling. So there was that as well. But I think we hit on it a moment ago. It was, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm working my guts out day in, day out with no purpose, no end goal in mind. And that was really depressing, getting into that cycle of just punching in, punching out every day. And say that wasn't a light bulb moment for me, realizing that had to change. That was a slow drip over a period of time. But once I finally understood that, it changed everything for me. All of a sudden, there's a purpose going into work every day. We're trying to achieve something bigger.
What were you trying to achieve that was bigger?
So you can't see it because it's on the board opposite my camera here, Michelle. But I would say I'm really not the type of the artsy, crafty, visual type of person generally, but I finally succumbed to producing a vision board maybe a year ago. I had my coaching qualifications and they really pushed it hard, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to take this seriously, I have to buy into this as well. So I tried it. And on my vision board up there, I got a few things like, well, first of all, I've got my exit goal, which might need to change, but at the minute it says 31 December 2027. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's the day I walk away from the business and go sit on the beach for the rest of my life. But that's the point when I want the business to be ready to sell, or ready for my team to step up and manage it day to day. And then around that date, I've got the fancy car. I've got a nice holiday home in the Alps, but also I've got more important things to me, which are, being able to put my daughter through good school, taking her to teach her to ski is one really important thing. Now, it might sound a bit daft, but I'd love to be able to be in a position where I can do that. I want to be more involved in working with an animal charity. So it's being able to use my time in a way that I have complete control over. And I look at this vision board right above my screen every day, and that keeps me focused on why. If we all feel a bit lazy sometimes, or do I really want to chase up that lead? Do I want to start bashing the phone because work's quiet? Actually, yes, I do, because all of these things are more important to me. And that's what keeps me going.
I love that. It's funny because vision boards is not, a new concept, but we really start there in terms of dreaming and goal setting. When you've obviously done this exercise now with clients, where you've got your clients to create dream boards, what I mean, what's been the biggest kind of exciting story for you with working with clients that have had success and maybe some of those dreams have started to come true?
Yeah. There's a few, but I suppose my best one then, I had a client who owned a commercial cleaning company, and he built that firm up for 5 years prior to me working with him. For the first 6 months, literally didn't have a single client. And he kept working at it. And then he got his first client. And then he got his second. And over the next 4 or 5 years, he built up a relatively successful business. And his background story is a fantastic tale, maybe for another day as well. But he reached out to me. Ahmed is the name of the owner. He reached out to me about 18 months ago. And he was clear from the outset. He said, I want to 10x my business in the next 5 years. And that's no mean feat for any established business. But he was honest enough to admit that he didn't quite know how he was going to get there. He just knew he wanted to get 10 times bigger than where he currently was. So spent a bit of time probing him. And it became apparent that Ahmed was, whilst he was the head of this fairly sizable cleaning business, he was still going to site 3-4 times a week, testing fire alarms, emptying bins, effectively still on the tools. So I asked him if he thought that was the best use of his time. And rather than him saying something like, oh, no one else can do it, or I can't afford to hire someone else, the usual excuses we tend to hear as coaches when we ask that question, his response caught me off guard a little bit. He said, Darien, I recently employed a head of operations. I paid him a big salary, stretched us financially, and then he completely shafted me. He did next to no work. He started talking badly about the company to our clients, and I had to sack him. And now I'm terrified to bring someone else in and make the same mistake again. So that was a bit of a, oh, wow, okay, moment for a coach. Right, I've got to seriously think about how to help Ahmed out of this position. So I could have said, you've been unlucky, mate. Get back on the horse, go and find someone else, and hopefully it will work out. And I think, talking about behavioral profiling, I knew Ahmed by then well enough to realize that if I'd said that, he would have, if not physically, mentally exited the conversation and possibly exited the coaching space, because that wasn't what he needed to hear. I needed to rebuild him emotionally, present him with an alternative path that was going to get him into that right headspace in a way that wasn't, to him, hugely risky, because I think he felt like he'd taken a big risk already and it hadn't worked out. So I asked Ahmed, rather than going to a regular coaching session, I asked him to sit down maybe over the course of the next week or so and draw up an organization chart for his business. And that included all the key roles that needed to be filled at the point that he was ready to exit the company. And I love doing this exercise with my clients. So I told him not to worry about any of the roles if they're not being filled now, but have a look. Imagine you're here in 5 years' time and don't think about the individuals, just write the roles that you need. And he came back a week or so later and he showed me this org chart. And it had Ahmed as CEO. Good, as important. But then he also had a senior management team with a CFO, head of HR, head of sales, CTO, head of operations. And under there were things like bookkeepers, administrators, BDMs, contract managers, things like that, as you'd expect. And then I said, okay, add the names of anyone you've already got working in the company. We started with a list of cleaners, good, and a few supervisors. And I pushed him a little bit more, and he put his outsourced accountant, his outsourced IT support, his outsourced HR company. Okay, we can work with those for now. They're filled to a lesser or greater degree. And then I said, Okay, Ahmed, now put your own name everywhere else you don't have a company, an employee in there. And as I said that, I could see the penny starting to drop with him. I think he was starting to realize where we were going. And the next question I said was, if I made you remove yourself from one of these roles today, which would be the easiest one to put someone else in? And I had to phrase that word carefully. What would be the easiest one to replace? Not the one you want to replace. What's the easiest? And after a bit of thought, he said, I think a contract administrator role is the easiest one. That takes up loads of my time. It's not particularly complex work. Long story short, 3 weeks later, we came back to the table and he'd hired a part-time contract administrator, and by his records, saved himself about a day a week. Okay, great. Easy win. We repeated that the next session, and within a month, he'd hired a handyman. And the handyman was a real turning point for Ahmed, because this guy was emptying the bins, was testing the fire alarms, was doing all the things that had kept Ahmed on the tools the previous 4 years, 5 years. All of a sudden, he was finding these good people in roles that were relatively easy to fill with employees who he could trust to do the work well, to train to his standards, and freeing up his time. And what was really good to see is once he freed up maybe 2-3 days of his week by this point, he was able to think a bit more strategically about the business. And he had his light bulb moment where he went, that head of operations role, the one that's really fundamental to my business, rather than bringing someone in, I've got a fantastic supervisor here who, with a bit of training, think I could upskill him. 5-6 months later, that supervisor is a contract manager, which is where he is today. And I reached out to Ahmed a couple of weeks ago to check in, see how things were going with that individual. And he said to me, I think he's another 5 or 6 months away before I can put him into that head of operations role, with a bit more training, a bit more development, a little bit of coaching from myself as well. But it's such a fantastic story because Ahmed's got the person he wants in the role, who he's developed, he's molded into what he wants. The contract manager now has felt so valued in the amount of time and effort and attention that Ahmed's put into him. And this has all come from someone coming to the table saying, my business is struggling because I've got this one role that I'm struggling to fill. And now the person he's put in it is absolutely working wonders for his business. So I think it's just a lovely story to hear how the company is thriving off the back of it.
Yeah, that's great. And so you being able to get him to future vision what the organization team would look like was able just for him to get the clarity that he needed for the type of team that he wanted to build for the business that he wanted to create. And so what has that meant for him today?
So Ahmed's business is on its way to 10xing. He's still got a long way to go, but in terms of the outputs, there's a clear direction now to how he wants to achieve that and how he's going to get there. And there's a big sales push in terms of bringing in the revenue to meet those targets, but he's also doing it the right way. It's not, grow to sell necessarily. There's a wider strategy for that, but we're doing it with the right back of house procedures, the right staffing, following, again, I don't want to sound like I'm just preaching the Action Coach Bible here, but following a lot of the methodologies that we learn under Action Coach to help our clients get there. The one I suppose really stands out, not just for Ahmed, but for a lot of my clients, we talk about the point of power in Action Coach. And I link that with a concept that Jocko Willink coined called extreme ownership. And Jocko Willink, for anyone who's not familiar, Navy SEAL turned author, and he defines the concept of extreme ownership as everything that goes right is my doing, everything that goes wrong is my fault. And that's one thing that Ahmed and I worked on from the very start, is we can either deny that there's a problem. We can make excuses. We can look to blame other people, or we can turn that around and take responsibility, be accountable for everything that's going on, not only in our business lives, but in our personal lives as well, because as business owners, those two things tend to overlap quite a lot. So Ahmed and I, and most of my clients, pretty much all of my clients, go through this extreme ownership journey with me. The first 2 to 4 sessions I have with all of them, we talk about what's going wrong in their business, and I listen to them finding reasons why it's not their fault that something's not going perfectly well. Even if it's going well, why it's not going as well as it could be. And I let them talk for a little bit. And then we spend, let's say, 2, maybe up to 4 sessions focused really around eliminating the BS, the excuses as to why they're not as successful as they should be, why they're not able to retire as early as they think they can, whatever it might be. And then gradually they realize that this concept of extreme ownership, that they're the captain of their own destiny, means that they can do everything in their business geared towards a strategic plan, an exit goal, something that helps them have a grounding. And again, this is equally valid for my business. This is why I know it works so well, because I had to go through that journey too. Focusing their attention. Okay, I know where I want to be in 5 years, whatever the date may be, and I am solely responsible for getting us there. If I've got an employee who's not performing, then that's because I've not trained them well enough, or that's because I haven't done something about that role as quickly as I should have. If I've not got enough sales coming in, then what am I as the owner doing to change that? That doesn't mean going out doing all the work yourself. It's giving your team the strategic autonomy to make the right decisions. And if they're not making the right decisions, to train them, to develop them, to learn how to do that. But ultimately, everything feeding back to you as a business owner. If this isn't going the way you want it, why not? What are you doing about it to change?
And that is like holding a mirror up, isn't it? It's like holding a mirror up. Your coach is reflecting that the blame and excuses back at you. And it can be very confronting, but also empowering. It's like, well, I can change the situation, or I can change that team member, or I can fix this problem. That often it's just a default, that blame and excuses, behaving below the point as opposed to, above the point. Walk me through that for business owners that are listening. What does that mean, that point of power?
So the point of power is the middle point, if you like, between deciding whether things that aren't going your way are within your control or whether they are entirely within your control, and anywhere on that spectrum, I suppose. But the point of power is the shift between, okay, I need to take responsibility here, or I'm going to live in this world of denial, excuses, blaming others. And what we occasionally see is a client not ready to embrace that point of power. And not many, but I would say maybe 1 in 10 of our clients, will talk to them about this and they'll go, no, you're wrong. This isn't my fault. You're not understanding my business. My business is different from everyone else's, and these reasons are completely unique
That's
to me.
a classic, isn't it?
And occasionally we can't get through to them initially, and they'll step away from coaching. More often than not, they come back within 3-6 months once they've had a chance to really dwell on it, think about it. Oh, actually, maybe it is me, and maybe I could do with some help to figure out how to resolve this. I would say most business owners, and I think it's understandable, most of them, first of all, get defensive when we talk about ownership and things not being your team's fault or society's fault, or whatever it might be. They are your fault as a business owner. And if they're not going the way you want them, what are you doing about it? Again, talk about behavioral profiling. If anyone understands DISC profiling, I'm 98D, which is quite extreme towards the let's not mince our words approach. Tom, my business coach, is a lot more people orientated. We have a very different way of approaching this, but the general theme is people will get defensive initially when we say you need to look at yourself before anyone. And I love the mirror metaphor that you used there, Michelle. Sometimes business owners get that quickly and then go, oh yeah, you're right, this is on me. And others, I was one of them. Took me a good month probably to accept that all of these things that were happening that I wasn't happy about were my doing. And once you get to that place in your mind, everything changes. And I can see it. I can literally see it in my clients' faces when that penny starts to drop. Oh, okay, yeah, maybe that is my fault. Maybe I do need to do things differently to achieve the outcome I want. And that's when, like I mentioned earlier, this isn't just about business. This feeds into our day-to-day lives as well. Take ownership for having an argument with your other half, for instance. Oh, I didn't handle that very well. Maybe that's why my wife, responded the way she did. So what do I need to do differently? Why am I not getting the things in my personal life that I would like? Why are my relationships not as strong as they should be? Because I'm not handling them in the right way. The concepts that we have in business coaching very often, can be fed into our day-to-day lives as well. And so it's brilliant to watch that transition with my clients as well, and the satisfaction they get from that.
And it's interesting the reframe when you are being confronted with that instinct of blame or excuse or denial, by saying the words, isn't that interesting, rather than, no, it's their fault, or whatever that might be. That's disempowering. Shifting that to the question or statement, isn't that interesting, opens your mindset, doesn't it, to, something differently. So maybe let's touch on that for a little bit, because I think that reframe of isn't it interesting is a good one for people to kind of take away from this interview today and just play with it. I hear clients of Action Coach, their children saying, isn't that interesting, when at school and things that, so yeah, talk to me about that.
I love the isn't that interesting concept. Just effectively putting it out there and making the client or whoever you're talking to sit back and go, ooh, okay, what have I just said then? Or how have I framed that? Because that's clearly caused not an adverse reaction, but it's made me think about what I've just said. I similarly, I use silence as a great tool sometimes. So something will get said and we'll just sit there, and it'll be the first one to break, Michelle, sometimes, and I'll make sure my client is the first one to break, because it makes them think really hard about why there's that silence in the room, because I'm not willing to be the one to tell them the answer or to tell them that what they've said might not be the right way of thinking about it. And it's amazing how often they'll say something and I'll just sit there, and then they'll realize and not contradict themselves, correct themselves. And the other one I like to use, which is again very similar, when they'll start, blaming other people, or, there's an issue and they're telling me why someone else has done something that's not to their satisfaction. And I'll say, okay, and who's to blame for that? Not in and who's to blame for that? But, who do you blame for that? And whenever you ask a question like that, the person receiving the question soon enough realizes that the answer is generally themselves. Again, it's just the way of framing these questions. And I'm relatively new. I'm 18 months as a business coach. I still got a lot to learn myself in terms of how we frame these questions. But the more we do it, the more nuance you can get with the way to extract the right answers from clients, or get them thinking about their own business and the questions they're asking themselves. The clients who have been on this journey the longest, what we see is they generally can coach themselves a lot of the time. So for the first 6-12 months, clients will come to us generally with, here's all my problems for the day. Let's solve these today, please, coach. All right, fine, we can do that. The ones who've been with us 2 years, 3 years or longer, they come to the session saying, right, let's talk about how we're going to get strategic on this aspect of the business today, or how we're going to develop these guys as part of the team into a specific area. Because when they start writing their issues, their questions down for their coaching session, they already know the answers. As soon as they write them down, they realize from their coaching previously what the right thing to do is. And the same as client turned coach myself, find that a really interesting journey. I used to start listing, I'm a process guy, I listed all the things I wanted to talk to Tom, my coach, about 3 or 4 days out from my session. And 90% of them I'd strike off before I got to the session, because I know what Tom's going to ask me here. He's going to say, yeah, whose fault is it that that's not gone right in the nicest possible way? He'll do it better than that. He'll say, what do you need to do about that? What do you plan on doing? And that's the thing. Coaches, we don't give answers very often. We make our clients think about what the right answer is by gently nudging them, or by asking open-ended questions, whatever it may be. And once a client realizes the kind of the art of coaching, they can do a lot of that themselves. And we're just there then in a slightly different capacity to help them with the strategic stuff.
And I love how that has such a lasting impact on someone's life. So by taking responsibility and knowing the answers then to so many of their questions that they bring to coaching, that's empowering. That's the impact that coaching has on business owners or on people, is that, this what they're learning, not just about business, but about themselves, is something that they can take on for the rest of their life, both personally and professionally. So, yeah, I love that. So, key takeaways from our chat, Darien. I love how you talk about how seeing the future vision of your organization chart in terms of people, and what roles are needed for the business. I think that was really powerful, how you shared that story with Ahmed, that had hired a high salary, somebody experienced to lead the organization, but not necessarily was the right fit and cost him a lot of money, and he learnt by that mistake. And I hear so many business owners say, I've tried that before and it didn't work. Or to your point, I've spent a lot of money on testing that, and I'm the only one that can do these things in my business, and they end up, hating their business and not loving what they're doing, like you mentioned. So being able to break it down, create an organization chart for your future business, and then what are the easiest roles that they can outsource at a time, makes that so much more achievable than hiring that big role that's going to fix all of the roles at once. So thank you for sharing that strategy. I love that. And the other takeaway for me is just that the point of power and the responsibility, and knowing that the challenges that you're having in your business. If you're listening to this episode, imagine if you could change that just by taking responsibility of that. And that's really empowering. And that's one of the benefits of coaching, to ask these great questions that your coach will mirror back to you, so that you can easily fix these challenges that you have. So thank you for sharing those 2 takeaways. And I also, you mentioned, business owners say, my business is different. I've heard that so many times, like, well, yeah, my business is different. Well, no, it's actually not. You still need people. You still need team. You still need to know what your numbers are. And that's why we're the experts at business. And that's why having a business coach can be so helpful for you to move forward in all areas. So amazing insight. Thank you, Darien. I want to finish with 3 fire questions. Are you ready? Question number 1, what's your favorite business book?
Oh, I'm going to cheat, Michelle. Can I give you two? I'll be very quick. The book that inspired me to be a business owner might sound a bit cliched, but Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki just made me fall in love with the idea of business ownership, entrepreneurship. My favorite book as a business owner is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. That is a great book on systemizing, thinking like an entrepreneur. And again, just gave me a real mindset shift. E-Myth is one of the first books I get any of my clients to read, and thoroughly recommend that.
And who's been the best mentor or coach for you throughout your career?
Oh, again, I hate to do it, but I'm going to take two.
You've got to give Tom a shout out there, right?
So, well, first of all, a chap called Dan Stanley, my life coach. Dan came onto my radar in 2020. We just gone into the first COVID lockdown. I had a brand new baby, first time parent, didn't know what I was doing, and no network around us because of the lockdowns. I had a business that was at that point coming up to 3 years old, and I completely lost direction in my life. I didn't really know how to cope with all of these things all at the same time. And Dan didn't talk much about the business, but because business was a big part of my life, it inevitably got wrapped in. But he rebuilt me, if I'm being quite honest, Michelle. I don't want to get into the emotional stuff of it, but I was a mess mentally. I wasn't in a great headspace, and he rebuilt me into the father, the husband, the business owner that I needed to be. Fast forward 12 months to 2021. I kind of finished that main journey with Dan, and I got that message from Tom Oldchurch on LinkedIn. And Tom was the guy who sat me down and helped me unravel what I was doing with this business. And say in particular, it was identifying the exit goal, what that looked like for me, and how I was going to get from a place I was pretty unhappy with what I was doing to really enjoying being a business owner again. And obviously more latterly, giving me the opportunity to coach as, for myself, which was, a real gift that I'm grateful for.
And Darien, what's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
I didn't receive this personally. I think it was in Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, if I remember correctly. Ray Kroc of McDonald's fame, he once said, build your business as if it were the prototype for 1,000 more just like it. And again, as a process and systems guy, that really spoke to me, is having the back of house in place that is working so smoothly, so efficiently, that the front of house side takes care of itself. That if we're going to do anything, we do it right. In my businesses now, we have flow charts, process maps for pretty much everything. And sometimes it takes a bit of explaining for my colleagues as to why we do it that way until something goes slightly wrong. And then these process maps, these flow charts work so well in getting us back on the right track, explaining to our clients the time frames, everything else that goes around it. We have that. My senior management team and I have that in the back of our heads all the time now. Build it as if you were building 1,000 just like it.
Love that. Thank you for spending time with me today, Darien.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Michelle Adams, your host here. Hats off to you for committing to your learning by listening to this podcast. And if you'd like some help implementing some of these strategies, then click the link in the description to find your local action coach. They can help you put these strategies into action and take your business and your life to the next level. In the meantime, like and subscribe so that you're the first to get our next episode. We'll see you soon.